The man with the white face entered the carriage at Rugby. He moved slowly in spite of the urgency of the porter, and even while he was still on the platform, I noted how ill he seemed. He dropped into the corner over again, and a sigh, an incomplete attempt to arrange his traveling shawl, and he became motionless, and his eyes started staring vacantly. Presently, he was moved by a sense of my observation, looked at me, put on a spiritless hand for his newspaper, then he glanced up again in my direction. I feigned to read. I feared I had unwittingly embarrassed him, and in a moment I was surprised to find him speaking. "I beg your pardon," I said. That book. That book is about dreams." Obviously," I answered, for it was Fortune Roscoe's Dream States, and the title was on the cover, and he hung silent for a space, and he sought words. "Yes, but that book, it tells you nothing." I did not catch his meaning for a second. "They don't know." I looked at him more attentively, at his face. "There are dreams, and there are dreams." That sort of proposition was one you couldn't dispute. "But I suppose... Do you ever dream, vividly?" "I dream. A little. I doubt if I've had 3 vivid dreams in a year." "Ah!" he said, and seemed for a moment to collect his thoughts. "Your dreams don't mix with your memories. You don't find yourself in doubt. Did this happen or did it not? Hardly ever. Except just for a momentary hesitation now and then, and I suppose few people do." He started pointing at the book. He started saying it happens at times and gives the usual explanation about intensity of impression and the like, to account for it happening. I suppose you know something of these theories. "I do. I know that they're wrong." His emaciated hand played with the strap for the window for the last time, and I prepared to resume reading, and that seemed to precipitate his next remark. He leant forward, almost as though he would touch me. "Isn't there something called consecutive dreaming that goes on night after night?" "I believe there is. There are cases given in most books of mental trouble." "Mental trouble? Yes! I dare say they are. It's the right place for them. By what I mean, it's the sort of thing where you're always dreaming. Is it even dreaming, or is it something else? Mightn't it be something else?" I should have snubbed the conversation right there. It was persistent, constant anxiety on his face. I remember now the look of his faded eyes, and the lid red-stained. Perhaps you know the look. "I'm not arguing about a matter of opinion. This thing is killing me. Dreams, if you call them dreams, night after night, vivid, so vivid. It seems unreal in comparison. I can scarcely remember who I am, what business I am on." He paused for a long time. Even now." "So the dream is always the same? Is that what you mean?" "It's over." "What? What do you mean?" "I died. Smashed. Killed. So much of me in that dream is dead. Dead forever. I dreamt I was another man, living in a different part of the world, in a different time. I dreamt that night after night, night after night. I woke into that other life, fresh scenes and fresh happenings, until I came upon the last." "And that's when you died?" "When I died." "Since then?" "Thank God. For that was the end of the dream. It was clear I was in for this dream. And after all, I had an hour for me. The light was fading fast. Fortune Roscoe was a dreary light with him. Lying in a different time. You mean in some different age? Is that where the dream took place? Yes. In the past. No. It was to come. To come. So what, 3,000 years in the future, for example? I don't know what year it was. I did when I was asleep. When I was dreaming, that is. And not now that I am awake. There's a lot of things I've forgotten since I awoke about that dream. Though I know them at times, and I would suppose I was dreaming. They call the year differently from our way of calling the year. What did they call it? No. I'm sad to say I forget. And after that he smiled weakly. For a moment I feared he did not mean to tell me his dream. And as a rule I hate people who tell their dreams, but this struck me differently. I proffered assistance even. How about you start at the beginning? I'll go. The dream began, I suggested. The dream began. Vivid from the first. I seemed to wake up in it suddenly. But curious that in these dreams I am speaking, I never remember this life that I am living now. It seemed as if the dream life was enough while it lasted. Perhaps, but I will tell you how I find myself when I do my best to recall it all. I don't remember anything dearly until I found myself sitting in a sort of logic state, looking over the sea. I had been dozing, and suddenly I woke up fresh, vivid, not a dream, because the girl stopped fanning me. The girl stopped. Yes, the girl! You must not interrupt, or I will forget you will put me out. He stopped abruptly. When I'm through, promise me you won't think me mad. No, I can't promise that, sir. But I will say you've been dreaming, so tell me your dream. I woke up. I say because the girl had stopped fanning me. I was not surprised to find myself there or anything of that sort. I did not feel I had fallen into it suddenly. I simply took it up at that point. Whatever memory I had of this life, this 19th century life, faded as I woke, vanished. I knew all about myself, knew that my name was no longer Cooper. I was Hedon. And all about my position in the world I'd forgotten a lot since I woke. There's a want of connection. It was all quite clear and matter-of-fact. He hesitated again, gripping the window strap. This seems bosh to you. No, just go on. Tell me what it was like. It was all in shadow, except the semicircle above the balcony that showed the sky and sea in the corner where the girl stood. I was on a couch. It was a metal couch, light-striped cushions, and the girl was leaning over the balcony with her back to me. The light of the sunrise fell on her ear and cheek, her pretty white neck and the little curls that nestled there. Her white shoulder were in the sun, and all the grace of her body was in the cool blue shadow. She was dressed, easy and flowing, and altogether she stood. So that it came to me how beautiful and desirable she was, as though I had never seen her before. And when at last I sighed and raised myself upon my arm, she turned her face to me. I had lived 35 years in this world. I have had a mother, sister, friends, wife, daughter, and all their faces. The play of their faces I know, but the face of this girl that is much more real to me. I can't bring it back into memory so that I can see it again, but I could draw it or paint it. He stopped, expecting me to say something. The face of a dream. The face of a dream. She was beautiful. Not that beauty which is terrible, cold, and worshipful, like the beauty of a saint, nor the beauty that stirs fierce passions, but a sort of radiation. Sweet lips that softened into smiles and gave gray eyes. She moved gracefully. She seemed to have parts with all pleasant and gracious things. He stopped. His face was downcast and hidden. Then he looked up at me and kept going on, making no further attempt to disguise his absolute belief in the reality of his story. You see, I had thrown up my plans, my ambitions. Thrown up all I'd ever worked for, desired for her sake. I had been a master man away there in the north, with influence, property, a great reputation, but none of it seemed worth having beside her. I had come to the place, the city of sunny pleasures, and with her, I left all those things to wreck and ruin, to save a remnant at least of my life. And while I had been in love with her, before I knew she had any care for me, before I had imagined she would dare, that she would dare, all my life had seemed vain and hollow, like dust and ashes, and it was dust and ashes night after night. Through the long days, I had longed and desired my soul, had beaten against the thing forbidden. But it's impossible for one man to tell another just these things. It's a motion, it's a tint, a light that comes and goes. Only while it's there, everything changes. The thing is, I came away and left them there in crisis to do what they could. Old man, left who? I asked, puzzled. The people in the north there. You see, in this dream, anyhow, I had been a big man, the sort of man men come to trust in, to group themselves about. Millions of men who had never seen me were ready to risk things for me. I had been playing that game for years, that big laborious game, that vague monstrous political game amidst intrigues and betrayals, speech and agitation. It was a vast weltering world, and at last I had a sort of leadership against the gang. You know it was called the gang, a sort of compromise of scoundrelly projects and base ambitions, of vast public emotional stupidities and catchworks, the gang. They kept that world, noisy and blind, year after year, and all the while it was drifting toward infinite disaster. Now, but I can't expect you to understand the shades, the complications of the year something or other ahead. I had it all down to the smallest detail in my dream. I suppose I had been dreaming of it before I woke, and the fading outline of some strange new development I had imagined still hung about me as I rubbed my eyes. It was some grubby affair that made me thank God for the sunlight, and I sat up on the couch and remained, looking at the woman, rejoicing that I had come all this way, all that tumult. And after all, I thought, this is life, love, beauty, desire, and delight. And they are not worth all those dismal struggles for vague, gigantic ends. And I blame myself for having sought to be a leader, when I might have given my days to her. But then I thought, if I had not spent my early days sternly and austerely, I might have wasted myself upon vain, worthless things. And at that thought, all my well-being went out. And my dear lady who had come at last and compelled me by her invincible charm. Come and see, she cried. And I can hear now. Come and see. Come and see the sunrise of Monte Solaro. And I remember how I sprang to my feet and joined her at the balcony. She put a white hand upon my shoulder and pointed toward the great masses of limestone, flushing as if it were into life. And I looked. First, I noted the sunlight on her face, caressing the lines. I described to you the scene. We were at Kapari. Kapari? Well, I've been there. I've clambered up Mount Solaro, drunk a very Kapari muddy stuff, like cider at the summit. I've been there. Ah! Said the man with the white face. Then perhaps you can tell me. You will know if this was indeed Kapari. For in this life, I have never been there. Let me describe it. We were in a little sunny room, out of a vast multitude of little rooms, very cool and sunny, hollowed out in the limestone of a sort of cape, very high above the sea. The whole island, you know, was so enormous it was like a giant hotel, complex beyond explaining. They called it a pleasure city. Of course. There was none of that in your time. I should say there's none of that now. Of course. Now. Yes. Well, this room of ours was at the extremity of the cape, so that one could see east and west. Eastward was a great cliff, 1,000 feet high. Beyond it, the Isle of the Sirens, and a falling coast that faded and passed into the hot sunrise. And when one turned to the west, distinct and near was a little bay, a little beach still in shadow, and out of that shadow rose Solaro, straight and tall, flushed against a golden crested, like a beauty enthroned. The white moon was floating behind her in the sky, and before us from east and west stretched the many, tinted sea, all dotted with little sailing boats here and there. Eastward, of course. These little boats were gray and very minute but clear, but to the westward there were little boats of gold, shining gold like little flames. And just below us was a rock, an arch worn through it. A rock with an arch thrown through it. I know that rock. I was nearly drowned there. It's called the Faragelloni. Faragelloni? Yes, she called it that. There is some story, but I forget the story. But the first thing I do remember, the first dream I had, that little shaded room and the beautiful air and sky and the dear lady of mine, with her shining arms and her graceful robe, and how we sat and talked half whispers to one another. We talked in whispers, not because there was anyone to hear, because there was still such a freshness of mind between us. Presently, we were hungry. We went out of our apartment, going by a strange passage with a moving floor, until we came to the great breakfast room. There was fountains and music. A pleasant and joyful place it was, with its sunlight and splashing. And we sat and ate and smiled at one another. And afterwards we went to the dancing hall. But I can't describe that hall. The place was enormous, larger than any building you've ever seen. In one place, the old gate of Kapari, caught into the wall of a gallery high overhead, light girders. And there were beautiful figures, strange. The place was inundated with artificial light that shamed the newborn day. And as we went through the throng, the people turned about and looked at us. For all the world my name and face were known, and how I had suddenly thrown up pride to struggle to come to this place. And they looked also at the lady beside me, though half the story of how at last she had come to me was unbeknownst or mistold. And few of the men who were there, I know, but judged me a happy man. The air was full of music, full of harmonious sense, full of rhythm and beautiful motion. Thousands of beautiful people swarmed about the hall, crowded the galleries, sat in myriad recesses. They were dressed in splendid colors, crowned with flowers. Thousands danced, great circle, and my lady, she danced. You know, she danced with a serious face, serious dignity. It went, I cannot describe it. It was infinitely richer and more varied than any music that has ever come to me awake. And he asked the man that he might speak to me for a little time apart. The man? Now, listen, I have no secret from this lady. What do you want to tell me? He glanced at her, as though almost he would appeal to her. Then he asked me suddenly if I had ever heard of a great avenging declaration the Evesham had made. Now, Evesham had always been the man next to myself in the leadership of the great party in the north. He was very forceful, a hard, tactless man, and only I had been able to control and soften him. I have taken no heed of any news for many days, I said. What has Evesham been saying? And with that the man began. Nothing. And I must confess even I was struck by Evesham's reckless folly in the wild, threatening words he had used. And this messenger they had sent to me not only told me of Evesham's speech, but went on to ask counsel and to point out what need they had of me. And while he talked, my lady stood a little forward, watched his face and mine. My old habits of scheming, organizing, reasserted themselves. I could even see myself suddenly returning to the north, and all the dramatic effect of it, and all that this man had said, witnessed, and the disorder of the party indeed. No to its damage. I should go back stronger than I had come. And then I thought of my lady. You see, how can I tell you? There were certain peculiarities of our relationship as things are. I should not have had to leave her. Indeed, I should not have had to renounce her clearly and openly. If I was to do all that I could do in the north, the man knew that. What? Sir, what have I to do with these things now? I feel I should be done with them. Do you think I'm cocaine with your people and coming here? No, but why can't you just leave me alone? I need to be done with this. I'm not anything but a private man, sir. Yes. But have you thought? This talk of war, these reckless changes, these wild aggressions. I stood up. No, I won't hear you. I took count. I'm not that man from your dream. And he seemed to consider the possibility of persistence. And he looked from me to where the lady sat regarding us. War, he said, as if he were speaking to himself, then turned slowly from me and walked away. I stood there, caught in the whirl of thoughts his appeal had set going. War. Just when I thought I was done, the man came back. In truth, I could not believe it a dream. For all the sobering reality of the things about me, I bathed. I dressed as if it were habit. And as I shaved, I argued why all men should leave the woman I loved to go back to fantastic politics in the hard and strenuous north. Even if Evesham did force the world back to war, what was that to me? I was a man with a heart, the heart of a man. Why should I feel the responsibility of a deity? You know, it's not quite the way I think about affairs, about real affairs. I'm a solicitor, you know, with a point of view. The vision was so real, you must understand. So utterly unlike a dream that I kept perpetually recalling little irrelevant details. Even the ornament of a book. Even the cover that lay on my wife's sewing machine in the breakfast room recalled the utmost vividness. The gilt lines that ran about the seat in the alcove where I had talked with the messenger about the deserted party. Have you ever had a dream that had a quality like that? That afterward, you remember little details you had forgotten. I had never noticed the point before. Well, never. This is what never seems to do with dreams. At least for me, I can't remember anything. No. I'm a solicitor. You must understand, in Liverpool, I could not help wondering what the clients and business people I found myself talking to in my office would think if I told them suddenly I was in love with a girl who was born a couple 100 years or so. I'm so worried about the politics of my great-great-grandchildren. I was chiefly busy that day negotiating 99-year building leases. He was a private builder in a hurry, and he wanted to tie him in every possible way. I had an investment with him. He showed a certain want of temper that sent me to bed still irritated. That night I had no dream, nor did I dream the next night, at least to remember. Something of that intense reality of conviction. It changed. I did begin to feel like it was a dream, but then it came back to me. And after that dream, I dreamt often. For 3 weeks and nights, the dream was my life. And the worst of it was there were nights when I could not dream. When I lay tossing on a bed in this accursed life. And there's something lost to me. Things were happening, momentous. Terrible things. I lived at nights my days, my waking days. This life I'm living now, this all around us became a faded, faraway dream. It's a drab setting, this cover of this book. And I could tell you all, every little thing in the dream. But as to what I did in the daytime, no. I cannot tell you, I don't remember. My memory has gone. The business of life slips from me. He leant forward, pressed his hands upon my eyes. For a long time he said nothing. Yeah, and then, I said. Then, the war burst like a hurricane. And he stared before me, looking at unspeakable things. One touch of unreality, and they would have been nightmares. But they were not nightmares. They were not nightmares. He was silent for so long that it dawned on me there was a danger of losing the rest of the story. But he went on talking again in the same tone, questioning like a self-communion. What was there to do but flight? I had not thought the war would touch Capri, but I had seen 2 nights after the whole place was shouting and bawling
Every woman, almost, and every other man wore a badge. Evisham's badge. There was no music, but a jangling war song, over and over again. Everywhere, men enlisting, and in the dancing halls they were drilling. The whole island will whirl with rumors. It was said again and again that fighting had begun. And I had not expected this. I had seen so little of the life and pleasure that I had failed to recognize with this violence of the amateurs. And as for me, I was out of it. It's like a man who had prevented the firing of a magazine. The time had gone. I was no one. The vainest stripling with a badge counted for more than I. And the crowd jostled us, bawled in our ears. Then a curse the song deafened us. A woman shrieked at my lady because no badge was on her. And we too went back to our own place again, ruffled, insulted. My lady white and silent. And I quivered with rage. So furious I was. I could have quarreled with her if I could have found one shade of accusation in her eye. And all my magnificence, all that I had built myself to be, had gone from me. And I walked up and down our rock cell, and outside was the darkling sea, and a light to the southward that flared and passed and came again. We must get out of this place, I said, over and over. I have made my choice, and I will have no hand in these troubles. I will have nothing of this war. We have taken our lives out of all these things. This is no refuge for us. Let us go. And the next day, we were already in a flight from the war. And all the rest was flight. All the rest was flight. He stared darkly. How much was there of it? He made no answer. How many days? His face was white and drawn. His hands were clenched. He took no heed of my curiosity. I tried to draw him back to his story. So I asked a question. Sir, where did you go? When you left? Southwest. We went by boat. But I should have thought an aeroplane. They had been seized. I questioned him no more. Presently I thought he was beginning again. He broke out into an argumentative monotone. Why should it be? If indeed this battle, this slaughter, this stress is life, why have we this craving for pleasure and beauty? And if there is no refuge, if there is no place of peace, and if all our dreams of quiet places are a folly and a snare, then why do we have such dreams? Surely it was no ignoble craving, no base intention brought to us. It was love. Love had come to me with her eyes, and robbed in her beauty, more glorious than all else in life, and in the very shape and color of life, and summoned me away. I had silenced all the voices. I had answered all the questions. I had come to her. And suddenly, there was nothing but war and death. I had an inspiration in that moment. After all, couldn't have this been only a dream? A dream? A dream when even now. For the first time he became animated. A faint flush crept into his cheek, and he raised his open hand and clenched it, and dropped it to his knee. He spoke, looking away from me. For all the rest of the time he looked away. We are but phantoms, and the phantoms of those phantoms. Desires like clouds, shadows of clouds, and wills of straw that eddy in the wind as days pass. But one thing is real and certain, one thing is no dream. It is the center of life, and all other things about it are subordinate or altogether vain. I fell in love with the woman of a dream, and she and I are dead together. A dream. How can it be a dream when it drenched a living life with unappeasable sorrow? When it makes all that I have lived for and cared for worthless and unmeaningful. Until that very moment, when she was killed, I believed we had still a chance of getting away. And through the night and morning that we sailed across the sea to Salerno, we talked of escape. We were full of hope, and it clung about us in the end. Hope for the life together we should lead out of all of it, out of the battle and struggle, the wild and empty passions, the empty arbitrariness. Thou shalt and thou shalt not. We were uplifted, as though our quest was a holy thing. And even when our boat, we saw the fair face of the great rock Capri, already scarred and gashed by the guns of emplacements and hiding places that were to make it fastness. And we reckoned nothing of the puffs and clouds of dust at 100 points amidst the gray. But indeed I made a text of that and talked. And there, you know, was the rock, still beautiful for all its scars, with its countless windows and arches, tier upon tier for 1,000 feet, a vast carving of gray broken by vine-clad terraces and lemon-orange groves, and masses of agave, prickly pears, puffs of almond blossom, and out of the archway, a piccola marina. Other boats were coming, and we came around the cape, and within sight of the mainland another little string of boats came into view, driving before the wind towards the southwest, and a little ultra-multitude come off.
It's love and reason, I said. It makes sense to flee from all that madness.
Yes! And though we were pleasantly, we saw a squadron of aeroplanes flying across the southern sky, we did not heed it. And they came rising and falling, growing larger, like some huge flight of gulls. And after that we noted to the northward, very high, Evesham's fighting machines, hanging high over Naples, like an evening swarm of gnats. They seemed to have no more to do with us than a flight of birds. Even the mutter of guns far away in the southeast seemed to us to signify nothing. Each day, each dream after that, we were still exalted. A sort of soul blindness had me. Plainly I could see that we were being hemmed in, that the great net of the giant warfare had taken its tolls on us. And once we fancied they had fired at us, taking us 4 spies at any rate, shot had gone shuddering over us. Several times we had hidden in woods from hovering airplanes. But all these things, they don't matter now. These nights, we were in the open place near those great temples, empty and desolate. Now I can see it. My lady was sitting down under a bush, resting a little. She was very weak, weary. They were still, fighting, far from each other. Those terrible new weapons he had never before used. I know that we were between the two armies, that they drew together, and I knew we were in danger, and that we could not stop and rest. And though all these things were in my mind, they were in the background. They seemed to be affairs beyond our concern. Chiefly, I was thinking. An aching distress filled me. For the first time, she had owned herself beaten and had fallen weeping, and behind me I could hear her sobbing. But I could not turn around to her, because I knew she had no need of weeping, and held herself so far and so long from me. "If we parted," she said, "if I had let you go." And I said, "No. Even now I don't repent. I will not repent." And overhead the sky flashed and burst. And all about us I heard the bullets making a noise like a handful of peas suddenly thrown. And they chipped the stones about us, and whirled fragments from the bricks that passed.
I tried to talk, but he put his hand to my mouth.
At the flash, I turned about. She stood up. She stood up, as though she wanted to reach me. And she had been shot through the heart.
He stopped, stared at me. I felt all that foolish incapacity a man feels on that occasion. I met his eyes for a moment, and then stared out the window. For a long space we kept silent. When at last I looked at him, he was sitting back in his corner, his arms folded, his teeth gnawing at his knuckles. He bit his nails suddenly and stared at it. I carried her toward the temples. "Yeah, I've seen those temples," I said abruptly.
I seem to remember that aeroplanes came up out of the south. The battle went away to the west. I could see it down the aisle. 3 or 4 times shells burst about the beach, and then that ceased. The curious thing is that I didn't think at all. I sat with my arms amidst the stones in a sort of lethargy, just stagnant. I don't remember waking up. I don't remember dressing that day. I found myself in my office with my letters all slit open in front of me.
And he stopped. There was a long silence. Suddenly I perceived that we were running down the incline from Chalk Farm to Euston. It started at this passing of time. I turned on him with a brutal question. Tone like, "Now or never, old man?" "Yeah. And did you dream again?"
Yes.
He seemed to force himself to finish.
Once more, as if it were only for a few instants. I saw a man. "You must not come here," I cried. "I am here. I am here with my dead." And he stared and shouted a question back at me in some unknown tongue. He shouted again, and I folded my arms and stood still. I signed to keep him away, but he continued to advance. I told him very clearly, "You must not come here. These are old temples, and I am here with my dead." Presently he was so close I could see his face clearly. It was a narrow face, dull gray eyes, black mustache. He had a scar on his upper lip. Dirty, misshaven, he kept shouting unintelligible things. I know now that he was afraid of me. At the time, that did not occur to me. And as I tried to explain to him, he interrupted me in imperious tones. He stared back. He looked at me with cruel eyes. I saw a sort of exultant resolve. Then suddenly, with a scowl, he swept his sword back and stopped abruptly. I became aware of a change in the rhythm of the trains. The brakes lifted their voices and the carriage jarred and jerked. This present world insisted upon itself. It became clamorous. I saw through the steamy window huge electric lights glaring down from a tall mast upon the fog. And he ran me through the heart with a sort of astonishment. No fear, no pain, just amazement. I felt it pierce me. Felt that sword drive home into my body.
Do you mean?
There was no pain, no sting, just amazement, and then darkness.
Sir, and the carriage door opened, emitting a flood of sound, and a porter stood regarding us, and a sound of doors slamming, and the hoof clatter of cab horses, and behind these things the featureless remote roar of the London cobblestones.
A darkness. A darkness.
Any luggage, sir? Said the porter. And that was the end? I asked. He seemed to hesitate, and almost inaudibly he answered.
No.
What was the end?
I couldn't get to her. She was there on the other side of the temple.
Yes. And?
Nightmares indeed. My God. Great birds fought, and great birds tore her.